Let's play a clip of Rand Paul in front of CPAC. He's now here, and I want to talk a little bit about. I did hear your conversation with Michael about Rand Paul's filibuster, which, as my wife was going into labor, I was like, "Sweetie, you got to hold off on this at least till midnight. I want to see what happens with this."
Did she do that for you?
She did. She did.
Okay. Let's give her some credit.
She gets a lot of credit for that. But let's hear Rand Paul. This one, the only clip we have from CPAC. Of course, it's folks will be hearing clips about CPAC ad nauseum, not just because of its of the quantity, but also the quality of the clips. But let's just play this Rand Paul one because it's another perfect example.
This month, I will propose a 5-year balanced budget. My budget eliminates the Department of Education.
Right. I mean, they're so excited at the notion of, well, good, we get rid of this Department of Education. We're all private school.
Right. And again, Rand Paul is somebody who was all for cutting the budget. And remember, it was unconstitutional for the government to make sure that African Americans can eat the same lunch counter as you and I. He supports a personhood amendment, would deprive women of the most basic rights. But when they asked him why he accepted Medicare for his practice, he's a doctor of sorts. He said because doctors have the right to make a good living too. I mean, have you ever heard anything so unbelievably hypocritical to say that in sort of a blithely, like, oh, we deserve to make a good living too. What about people that need to make a minimum wage to eat? What about people on Social Security that need to pay for their medicine and that's the only way they can do it? And it's like, you know what? I sent a tweet out earlier. I hope Rob Portman's son comes out of the closet in favor of Social Security, an assault weapons ban, raising the minimum wage. I hope maybe we find out he's pregnant. He has tough decisions to make. I mean, because maybe that's the only way we can get Rob Portman and all of his friends to actually look at these other issues. Rob Portman, I know, again, I'm from Cincinnati, comes from a wealthy family that owns one of the most oldest and sort of most renowned hotel restaurants called the Golden Lamb in Lebanon, Ohio. Laugh at that as you will. In Lebanon, Ohio, which is a sort of far out kind of exurb of Cincinnati. He went to Dartmouth. He never had any trouble financially in life. Maybe if one of his kids were unemployed and poor, he'd feel differently about that. And, and his social conservatism, which I don't think he believes in most of it, comes from a time, Cincinnati 30 years ago was the place that spawned the likes of Ken Blackwell. People like myself have been moving there for a variety of reasons, and it's changed. It supported Obama the last 2 elections. So maybe it's now a little safer for Rob Portman to come out for some of these things. But in the end result is I don't care what he really thinks. I care what he does. Right. And all of these guys either believe this garbage or behind the scenes, I think a whole lot of them, from your Lisa Murkowski's to your Rob Portmans to your Dan Coates' and others, feel the same way their colleagues who've left the Senate, many of whom came out and endorsed Obama, Durenberger, the former senator from Minnesota, and I'm trying to think of former governor, what was his name, Larry, whatever, from South Dakota, who, all these guys, because they're no longer in elected office.
Right.
Like Huntsman now. So they can come out and before all this stuff, I don't believe that it differs so much that, I was in Congress 5 years ago, but I've completely changed since I've left. These guys are just all scared and they won't do the right thing. I mean, I shouldn't say all. I'd say there's a chunk of them that are scared, and then there's all the Tea Party people, who are absolutely insane and sit in corners and stare at the wall, and try to think of ways to make other people's lives more difficult.
There are 2 implications here. One is that it's an insight into the real sort of the way in which conservatives think in terms of their capacity for empathy, because there's really, I mean, your tweet says it all. I mean, if Portman had relatives who were, the takers, not the makers, or as they would perceive it, perhaps his perspective would be different. And then, of course, it also gets back to that thing that we've been saying for some time now, is that the Republican Party basically made a Faustian deal to enhance their electoral opportunities, which is to create an electoral base out of a combination of misogyny and homophobia and racism and nationalism and
brown shirt wing. Of
yes,
the party. And I'm sorry to say it that way, but that's where they are the storm. They're the foot soldiers who go and raise hell.
yes, and do it on the backs of these social issues, and society is leaving them behind, but they are still essentially beholden to that, and we see it time and time again. And so, I mean, it's simply it's fascinating. And again, what courage do we really need? I mean, are we really going to say that that Portman, it took courage for him to come out and say, "I don't want to screw over my own son"? I mean, honestly. I mean, really.
Dick
I mean,
Cheney-
honestly. Yeah.
Dick Cheney's one of the most antisocial human beings. If you saw that piece in the New York Times today, because this new documentary is coming out on him, he's still like, "We did the right thing in Iraq. I'll do it again." Thousands of people died because of this guy's lies and this guy's stupidity and his ineptitude. And I can go on and on. He's literally a terrible human being. But he's for gay marriage because that's that helps his own personal family. That helps his daughter. And again, I'm not saying I'm not glad to have Rob Portman with us on this.
Right.
I am.
No, of course.
The more the merrier. And I'm glad to have Mark Kirk now supporting Medicaid. And I'm glad to have Chris Christie thinking the government has a role in providing hurricane relief. But at the same time, we still need to call out these people and say, when can you see beyond your own circumstances?
Right.
When can we talk about evolution, Rob Portman's, evolved in this issue. I think this really is evolutionary biology. At some point, these guys haven't quite made it as far up the evolutionary ladder as some of us.
That's right.
Because we're all born originally to fear everything that's different. That's how the species survived. As we get to be more evolved, we learn that, hey, that person has darker skin than me. That person is a woman. I'm a man. That person has a different sexual preference. Maybe they're still the same as me in most ways. Maybe, in the ways that count, we're still the same people. But on the right, they just can't seem to take that step up, further step up the evolutionary ladder. It seems that that part of the ladder breaks and they fall down to the bottom whenever they try to do that.
Well, I mean, I think the conservative id is fundamentally reliant upon this notion of my circumstances are universal. Right. And I cannot imagine, it is impossible for me to perceive that other people could be just as good a people in different circumstances than me.
Only our way, God, country, and you can only do it the way we've done it.
And they, even in those instances where they have a perfect example, not just of their own, that in their narrow silo, that the circumstances are different. But they can't even learn from that example that wow, I was really myopic on this one issue. Perhaps I'm myopic on these other issues.